December 21st, 1989, Bucharest. Nicolae Ceaușescu steps onto his balcony, dark overcoat, fur hat, looking down at a crowd of 100,000 people. For 24 years, this square had only ever given him one sound: applause, on command, in a country watched by 400,000 secret police informants. He starts his speech.
Doresc în primul rând să vă adresez dumneavoastră.
A few minutes in, the sound changes. Not applause, booing. Live cameras catch it. His eyes widen, his mouth hangs open, his hand goes up for silence that doesn't come. 4 seconds of dead air. 4 seconds in which 22 million people watched the most feared man in the Eastern Bloc simply run out of words. 168 hours later, he was dead. Palace to helicopter, helicopter to a military cell, a 55-minute trial on Christmas Day, then a concrete wall and 120 bullets, faster than the cameraman could even get the shot in focus. But how did a hungry, dirt-poor cobbler's apprentice claw his way to absolute power, only to lose it all and his life in a single week? History is in the headlines, but the truth? That's hidden in the profiles. Welcome to Profile. Subscribe to join our community of curious minds. To understand the architect of this tragedy, we must look to the dirt-poor village in southern Romania where Nicolae Ceaușescu was born in 1918. He was the third of 10 children in a peasant family, a household where hunger was a constant, unwelcome guest. At the age of 11, his father sent him to Bucharest to work as a cobbler's apprentice for a distant relative. The boy traveled part of that long journey on foot, his pockets as empty as his future seemed. The Bucharest of the 1930s was a city of jagged contrasts. Grand boulevards, modeled after Paris, stood in the shadow of dense slums where workers lived 6 to a room. It was in these dark fringes that the teenage Nicolae, hungry and largely self-taught, encountered the Romanian Communist Party. He was only 14. At the time, joining the party was a monumental risk. It was a clandestine, illegal organization under the constant surveillance of the secret police. Ceaușescu joined regardless, perhaps out of ideological conviction, or perhaps because the party offered a sense of purpose and belonging to an uneducated peasant boy who had neither. The price of his choice was years of imprisonment. Between 1936 and 1944, Ceaușescu spent the prime of his youth in Romanian prisons, initially for distributing leaflets and later for anti-fascist activities. Yet, for him, prison was a university of sorts. Behind those bars, he met his most crucial mentor, Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej, the future leader of communist Romania. Dej saw neither genius nor charisma in the young man. Instead, he found something far more valuable in the machinery of authoritarian politics: absolute loyalty, inexhaustible patience, and an instinctive grasp of how to quietly and methodically infiltrate the institutions of power. During those years, another fateful bond was forged. In the early 1940s, Nicolae met Elena Petrescu. Her background was a mirror image of his own: poor, ambitious, poorly educated, and desperate to be taken seriously. They married in 1946. Elena would eventually become the second most powerful figure in Romania, a woman who, despite never finishing high school, would amass honorary doctorates from across the globe and earn a reputation for ruthlessness that often eclipsed even her husband's. As one former diplomat later remarked, "You could sometimes persuade Nicolae, but Elena, never." With the end of World War II and Romania falling under the sphere of Soviet influence, Ceausescu's ascent accelerated. He climbed the party ranks with calculated discipline. He was not the brightest, nor was he an orator. His peers described him as a mediocre speaker and a shallow thinker, but he possessed a mastery of power engineering that others lacked. When Gheorghiu Dej died in March 1965, the 47-year-old Nicolae Ceaușescu was elected General Secretary of the Communist Party. At the time, his name was unknown in the West, and the Kremlin saw no reason for concern. To all observers, he appeared to be a mundane, controllable successor for a mundane regime. The world was wrong. Ceausescu had spent 30 years watching, waiting, and learning one fundamental truth: how power truly functions. And now, for the first time, all of that power was in his hands.
August 1968. Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia to crush the Prague Spring. At that critical juncture, every leader in the Eastern Bloc stood in lockstep with Moscow, praising the intervention. Every leader except one. Nicolae Ceaușescu stood on a balcony in Bucharest and performed an act that, in the bipolar world of the Cold War, was akin to political suicide. He publicly condemned the Soviet invasion, labeling it a grave mistake and a danger to European peace. That 20-minute speech split Romanian history in two. For a fleeting moment, the people felt they had a leader who spoke for them, not for the Kremlin. But the echoes of that speech traveled far beyond Romania's borders. They were heard in Washington, D.C. To the American foreign policy establishment, desperate for any fracture in the monolithic Eastern Bloc, Ceausescu suddenly became the West's favorite communist. In 1969, Richard Nixon arrived in Bucharest, the first U.S. president to set foot in an Eastern Bloc nation since the start of the Cold War. Nixon shook hands with Ceausescu, calling Romania a bridge between East and West. In 1978, Queen Elizabeth II granted him an honorary knighthood, and Ceausescu was paraded through the streets of London in a royal carriage alongside the Queen. While Western leaders competed for a photo op with him, the reality inside Romania was a chillingly different story. The West consciously blinded itself to one of the most pervasive systems of espionage and suffocation in the Soviet sphere. The Securitate, Romania's secret police, managed a staggering network of 400,000 informants in a country of just 22 million. By the 1980s, no home was safe. Neighbor reported on neighbor, teacher on student, and children even on their parents. The Securitate's file on a simple laborer who had told a single joke about Ceausescu could reach 340 pages. Henry Kissinger, the architect of U.S. foreign policy, famously captured the essence of the era's realpolitik. He is a difficult dictator, but he is our difficult dictator. Ceausescu played this game with Machiavellian skill. To appease the West, he sent Romanian athletes to the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, which the rest of the Eastern Bloc boycotted, and maintained diplomatic ties with Israel. But inside his borders, he was enforcing Decree 770, the most aggressive population engineering law in post-war Europe. Abortion and contraception were strictly outlawed. All women of childbearing age were forced to undergo monthly examinations by state doctors to ensure they were pregnant. His goal was the mass production of soldiers and workers. The result was a catastrophic surge in maternal mortality from illegal procedures and state orphanages overflowing with hundreds of thousands of unwanted children. Years later, the skeletal, haunting images of these forgotten children would become the most painful legacy of the Ceausescu era.
In 1971, the mask of the moderate reformer finally slipped. Ceausescu traveled to China and North Korea. In Pyongyang, as he watched the million-man parades and the deification of Kim Il-sung, he was not horrified. He was mesmerized. He returned to Bucharest with a new vision. He would transform Romania into the North Korea of Europe. He became convinced that a leader should not merely govern a country. He should inhabit every room, every street corner, and the very minds of the citizenry. What was once a simple personality cult evolved into a professional industry of flattery. His image was installed in every office, school, and hospital. State television, which broadcast for only 2 hours a day to save electricity, devoted most of its airtime to his glorification. Poets were mandated to hail him as the architect of the Golden Age. Elena was elevated alongside him. Despite her lack of even a high school diploma, her official biography reinvented her as a world-leading PhD in chemistry. Scientists who worked with her later revealed she did not know the basics of the field. Her thesis was ghostwritten under extreme duress. Nevertheless, she was crowned Mother of the Nation, and the couple became known as the Conducător, the leader. But the true madness was financial. In the 1970s, Ceausescu had taken massive loans from Western banks for grandiose, illogical industrial projects. By 1981, the foreign debt hit $10 billion. It was then that Ceausescu made the most lethal decision of his reign. Instead of restructuring the debt, he declared that Romania would repay every cent of the $10 billion and do it immediately. The price of this decision was soul-crushing. Throughout the 1980s, Romania exported almost everything it produced to earn the currency needed for repayment. Grain, meat, oil, and electricity were shipped abroad while the people were left with nothing. Bread was rationed, meat became a myth, and heating in the bone-chilling winters was restricted to a few hours a day. Romanians sat in their freezing apartments wearing overcoats, reading by candlelight, while their country exported electricity to its neighbors. Yet, while Bucharest sat in darkness, the spotlights of a gargantuan project pierced the night sky, the Palace of the People. Ceausescu ordered the destruction of a vast swath of historical Bucharest, including ancient churches and the homes of 40,000 people, to make room for the second-largest administrative building in the world after the Pentagon. A structure with 1,100 rooms, 12 floors above ground, and 8 floors beneath. 700 architects and hundreds of thousands of workers were conscripted for its construction. In April 1989, Ceausescu proudly announced on television, "Romania's foreign debt is zero." The nation was finally free, but its people had been pushed to the brink of explosion. The monetary debt was paid, but Ceausescu's debt to the nation's patience had reached its breaking point. 8 months later, in a small town in the west, a spark was ignited that would turn this stone empire to ash in a matter of days. Ceausescu's final act of hubris began on December 18, 1989. Romania was already smoldering, yet the dictator boarded a plane for a state visit to Tehran, blindly walking away from his own downfall. As he stepped onto the red carpets of the Iranian palace, his country was catching fire. What began as a protest against the eviction of a dissident priest had rapidly metastasized into a full-scale uprising against poverty and tyranny. On December 17th, just 1 day before his departure, the security forces had opened fire on the crowds. In a display of staggering cognitive dissonance, Ceausescu left the management of the crisis to Elena and his top lieutenants, convinced the hooligans had been crushed. Historical records and the private diaries of the Iranian president at the time reveal the depth of Ceausescu's delusion. During a late-night meeting in Tehran, the host questioned him about the reports of unrest.
Ceausescu dismissed them with a wave of his hand, calling the news Western propaganda and lies. While the world watched the blood flow in the streets of Timișoara, the dictator sat in a palace thousands of miles away, shrouded in a veil of absolute denial. On December 20th, Ceausescu returned to Bucharest. He immediately went on national television blaming foreign interference and terrorist elements for the unrest.
Patrii noastre socialiste.
The next morning, December 21st, he decided to perform his ultimate ritual of power, a mass rally of loyal workers in front of the Communist Party Central Committee building. Ceausescu stood on the balcony wearing his signature dark overcoat and fur hat, looking out over a crowd of tens of thousands.
Doresc în primul rând să vă adresez dumneavoastră.
He began his speech with the usual rhetoric about the achievements of socialism. But mere minutes into his oration, something unprecedented happened. From the heart of the organized crowd, a low murmur arose, not of applause, but of jeers. For the first time in a quarter century, the choreographed masses had broken their chains. The live television cameras, broadcasting to the entire nation, captured Ceausescu's face in a tight close-up. His eyes widened in shock. His mouth hung open. He raised his right hand in a desperate, trembling command for silence. Then came the silence. 4 seconds of terminal stuttering. In those 4 seconds, the spell of the dictatorship was broken. The people realized their God King was not only afraid, he was powerless. Elena, sensing the collapse, leaned into the microphone and hissed a command to her husband that was captured on the live feed. Promise them a raise. But it was too late to bribe a nation that had been starved for a decade. The live broadcast cut to patriotic music, but the image of the trembling dictator was already scorched into the collective psyche of millions. As the sun set, the square in Bucharest became a battlefield. Ceausescu, still unable to grasp that the tide had turned, ordered a ruthless crackdown. Tanks rolled into the streets, and the sound of gunfire tore through the night. By the following morning, Bucharest was a volcano. The Minister of Defense, the man who had been the arm of the repression, committed suicide or was executed, and the army began to defect, joining the people. At 12:06 p.m., as protesters battered down the doors of the Central Committee building, a white helicopter rose from the roof. Nicolae and Elena Ceaușescu were fleeing their own capital. From the air, the dictator looked down upon a scene he never thought possible. Thousands of people swarming his palace like angry ants, waving Romanian flags with the communist insignia cut out from the center, leaving nothing but a gaping hole. Their flight from the capital resembled a dark comedy. The helicopter pilot, claiming they were being tracked by radar, forced them to land on a roadside 80 kilometers from Bucharest. Two of the most powerful people in Europe were now refugees on a rural road, desperately waving their hands to hitch a ride from passing cars. A local doctor eventually picked them up, witnessing Nicolae's trembling hands and Elena's deathly silence, the unmistakable signs of a dream's collapse. They eventually sought refuge in an agricultural institute, unaware that the army had already tracked them. They were only hours away from capture. The next 3 days were spent in a cramped cell at the Târgoviște military garrison. In Bucharest, the National Salvation Front, led by Ion Iliescu, had seized control. They knew that as long as Ceausescu was alive, loyalists from the Securitate might continue a bloody guerrilla war. The decision was made: a summary trial and an even swifter execution. On December 25th, Christmas Day, the court convened. The atmosphere inside the room was heavy and electric with tension.
The prosecutor screamed, accusing the couple of genocide and the systematic destruction of the national economy. Ceausescu, draped in his old arrogance, dismissed the court as illegal, declaring, "I will only answer to the great National Assembly." Elena looked upon the judges with utter contempt. When questioned about their ill-gotten wealth, she sneered, "We wanted nothing for ourselves. We gave everything to this nation." It was a dialogue between two irreconcilable worlds. The world of a dictator who believed himself the absolute owner of a people, and the world of a people who had reached the limit of their humiliation. The trial lasted a mere 55 minutes. The defense lawyer, acting more like a second prosecutor, offered no real defense. The verdict was inevitable: death. As their hands were being tied, Elena shrieked, "I was like a mother to you! How dare you!" But the soldiers who had volunteered for the firing squad were men who had endured years of hunger and terror. They led the couple to the garrison courtyard, facing a cold, concrete wall. In his final seconds, Nicolae began to sing the Internationale, the anthem that was once the symbol of worker liberation, now twisted by the lips of a man who had enslaved them. The soldiers were so consumed by rage that they did not even wait for the commander's final order. The air was suddenly filled with the thunder of automatic fire. 120 bullets were discharged in a matter of seconds. The cameraman was so caught off guard by the suddenness of the execution that he missed the moment of impact. By the time he reached the courtyard, he saw only two lifeless bodies crumpled in their own blood. The fall of the Ceausescus was more than just the end of a regime. It was a testament to the speed at which a stone empire can turn to dust. What is your perspective on the fate of the Ceausescus? What do you believe is the greatest lesson to be learned from his 168-hour collapse? Every story has two sides, and the truth usually lies somewhere in the shadows. We want to hear your perspective. Join the discussion in the comments below. If this profile gave you a new perspective, support our mission with a like and share. Thank you for being part of the Profile community. Until next time, stay curious.